Good afternoon, everybody. I'm always concerned when we do a program in the middle of the afternoon. I'm not sure if everybody will make it out of their workplaces, get to a spot in Bombay, but I'm really glad to see that the room is full here this afternoon. So a very good afternoon to Mr. Hiranandani, who I think has come from a long ways, our panelists, and also our audience. My name is Banti Chand, and I work for the Asia Society in India. And AECOM and the Asia Society are delighted to welcome you to this afternoon symposium, Imagine Mumbai in Search of New Ground. This is the third year of our partnership with AECOM, and we are doing a global series with them, Imagine 2060, Delivering Tomorrow's Cities Together. And we are very pleased to say that we are inaugurating the land series of Imagine 2060 in Mumbai. And Sean Chow, who's here with us, he's the president of Asia Pacific for AECOM. He has envisaged and championed this series, and he's going to talk a little more about the initiative in his remarks. And I don't think everybody in the room knows about the Asia Society, so I'm going to say a few words. We are a 70-year-old organization and founded by the Rockefellers, and we have, over the last 7 decades, worked to promote collaboration and exchange across and within the Asia Pacific. We have 13 centers around the world, and we have just added a new center in Japan. And our Australasia Center is adding a presence in Melbourne, and India, if we are lucky, will add a presence in Delhi. And we work in the areas of business and policy and arts and culture. We use creative formats to present cross-disciplinary perspectives, fresh insights, informed ideas with diverse speakers, and always an independent and non-partisan view on Asian and world affairs. So what we are trying to do here is that through dialogue with leaders, thinkers, academics, citizens, we explore vital global issues. We want to create awareness and effect change. And the Asia Society India Center has been operating in Mumbai since 2006 and has in the last 13 years organized over 700 programs. So I think we can legitimately claim a modest contribution to the public discourse in Mumbai on policy, business, arts, and culture. And we are a membership organization. This is a very important note here. And the financial support that is provided by our corporate, individual, and patron members is what keeps us operational in India. We raise all our money locally. So if I would urge you to become an individual or a corporate member of Asia Society so we can continue to do our work in the space of public education and awareness. And we're expecting a lot of people who are still trundling in, but I would like to thank Firoza Godrej, who's on our board of directors, who should be here shortly, and also many of our long and committed supporters, IDFC, HDFC, Everstone, Ambit, supporters from the diplomatic community, the Singapore CG and the Belgian CG are here this evening. The Chinese CG will be arriving as well in a short while, and we have many friends from the US Canadian consulate as well in the audience. And the coastal city, and let me go back to the topic for the day. The coastal city of Mumbai has always welcomed people from different parts of the world and India. And it is bursting at the seams to accommodate the dreams and aspirations of over 24 million people who call it home. Number could be slightly debatable, but that's where we are. The land and its people, it's always been a precious commodity and very contentious for the city. It features in books, films, music, art, and a very involved and passionate civil society that works actively in some of the largest slums of Asia. A ballooning population, years of land reclamation, and major building projects have put considerable pressure on the land and ecosystem of Mumbai, as well as the state government and the bureaucracy. So our discussion today focuses on some of these issues and how best we can build an inclusive city. A multidisciplinary approach like today considers the needs of diverse stakeholder groups and recognizes that trade-offs are made to ensure the greater good. So we have a distinguished keynote speaker and panel discussion with experts with us this afternoon. And after the panel discussion, there will be a networking reception where we can all share and exchange ideas. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Sean Chow, who's President Asia Pacific for AECOM. AECOM is a world-leading integrated infrastructure firm with over 87,000 employees in 150 countries, and Sean leads 115,000 of them in Australia, New Zealand, Greater China, India, and Southeast Asia. Shortly after graduating from Harvard with a Master of Architecture in Urban Design, he decided to return to Asia, where he has played a pivotal role in the creation of award-winning master plans for high-density new towns and the revitalization of existing urban landscapes, including signature projects in China, India, Malaysia, and the Philippines. In 2016, Sean spearheaded the publication Jigsaw City, which explores philosophies around forming new urban environments and experiences in Asian cities. And raising a discussion on this important topic was how Asia Society and AECOM came to work together. Sean.
Thank you, Bhante. It's always a great pleasure to work with you and your team. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, distinguished speakers. So on behalf of myself, Sean Chow, and Mr. Avinash Misra, sitting over there, he's the Chief Executive of AECOM India, I would like to thank all of you here for joining us for the opening symposium of our third year of Imagine 2060, delivering tomorrow's city together. Our collaboration with Asia Society began in 2016. 3 years ago together, we saw a need to bring cities to the forefront of the global conversation on long-term resiliency and sustainability. So what could we start doing now to build a strong foundation for generations to come? From economic development to mobility, cultural identity, innovation, and well-being of a city and its people. Imagine 2060 is a platform for citizens and leaders to collaborate on bold ideas that will influence our future. So each year, we have focused on a different element: water, air, and this year, Earth. Over the past 2 years, we have had close to about 100 speakers and around 1,500 participants come together to imagine the future of places like Manila, Sydney, Los Angeles, New York, Hong Kong, Melbourne, and Delhi. We've also produced a report on our year 2 conversations towards a clear sky, and along with the copies of our year 1 report at the water's edge. Both of them are here for you today. Thank you very much. So this year, we're launching our 3rd series on Earth under the theme, In Search of New Ground, exploring optimization and innovation in land use and land development approaches. After our first city, Mumbai, we will visit Singapore and Melbourne with the concluding symposium in Hong Kong. So, why begin our conversation on Earth and land in Mumbai? To start, by 2060, India's population is projected to reach nearly 1.7 billion people, making this the most populous nation in the world. With 18% of the population in the world, yet it only accounts for 2.4% of the world's total land area. Uneven economic development in other parts of this country have led to a massive rural to urban migration. Mumbai is now the most populous city in India, and by 2060, its population is projected to more than double, reaching over 42 million. That is more than the entire population of Canada living in one city. So how can Mumbai continue to absorb and accommodate this rapid influx of people? And can urban development enhance its quality of life and help to defend it from man-made threats, natural disasters, and climate change? This dialogue aims to find ways to rethink and inspire our current land use and land development strategies to address these and other pressing issues, such as, do we have enough land to accommodate our future growth? What is the most sustainable way to work with the land we currently have? And what are the constraints to creating more through reclamation and remediation? Instead of continuously consuming greenfield, is there more we can be doing to regenerate brownfield? And can we improve our policies in order to plan our land more holistically moving forward? And are there more creative ways for existing land to be used for multiple purposes? Can better infrastructure in the form of roads, bridges, tunnels, water supply, and sewage treatment play a role in mitigating the effects of land shortage? Here in Mumbai, can building vital new infrastructure to enhance mobility, economic productivity, and social inclusion, such as Mumbai Metro Line 3, Navi Mumbai Airport, or the Coastal Road, be balanced with the resulting environmental impacts? And importantly, what lessons can Mumbai take and apply from other densely populated cities like New York, London, or Hong Kong? Over the next few decades, what Mumbai does with its land will not only serve as an example for the rest of India, but also for the developing countries throughout the world. So here today, we have experts in urban planning, transportation, housing, land utilization, and public policy. And together, we will imagine and discuss the role of the land in sustaining and bolstering the economic, social, and environmental health, as well as the resiliency, connectivity, productivity, and last but not least, the authenticity of our future cities. So, ladies and gentlemen, may our dialogue today inspire everyone who has a role in shaping this dynamic city, Mumbai, as well as those in cities around the world facing similar challenges. So I wish everyone a robust and thought-provoking discussion on the future of our land. Thank you. Thank you.
Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I'd like Avinash Mishra to stand up. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge his contribution to our program this afternoon. And Rebecca is also in the room. Rebecca? I can't see her. There she is. Rebecca has helped greatly. And I would like to also acknowledge my team. So if you can just, put your hands up. Karishma in particular. Okay. So, and now to introduce our keynote speaker for the afternoon, Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani. I don't think he needs much of an introduction in Mumbai, but for all our outside guests, he's the co-founder and managing director of the Hiranandani Group, which is known for its signature premium townships in Powai and Thane. And the group has since diversified and has holdings in education, healthcare, hospitality, infrastructure, entertainment, and organized retail. He is the national president for National Real Estate Development Council, which works under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. And he has worked on the state policy for slum rehabilitation in Mumbai, served on the board of the Housing and Urban Development Corporation, HUDCO, and he's also the chairman of the ASSOCHAM National Council on Real Estate, advisor of the Real Estate Committee of FICCI, and he does a lot of work in philanthropy and has several schools, hospitals that he supports. And truly, if there's anybody who knows Mumbai real estate, it is Mr. Hiranandani. So, Mr. Hiranandani.
A very good afternoon. I feel extremely honored. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to come, and what a fantastic audience, really. I was feeling when I came in and I saw all the wonderful people over here coming from all over the world to share with us their thoughts and ideas. I feel extremely humble. I'm especially humbled with Ashwini Bhide sitting over here. She does the Metro 3 and has really taken a great part of the sea change which is taking place in Mumbai. And of course, a large number of friends who are here. If I name them, it would take the rest of my speech away. So I'll kind of acknowledge all of you over here. Mumbai as a city and what it has been, instead of looking at what is going to be 60 in 2060, let me look back at 1947. 1947, the British left India, and at that point of time, we had people staying in houses which were available on rent on Marine Drive at 300 rupees a month. And the rest of the people lived on chawls, single-room tenements with common toilets at 5 to 10 rupees per month in terms of it. There was 0 unauthorized tenements in the entire city of Mumbai. So there was nothing like an unauthorized building or house in the entire city of Mumbai. Of course, we had a very small population which has grown and has just been described about the shift from the rural to the urban bias in terms of what growth has taken place. But the end result today, as you may see it for Mumbai in particular, is the fact that more than 50% of the people live in jhopatpattis in the city of Mumbai. So everybody who has a house over here is very lucky that you live in an authorized house as far as that is concerned, because half the city of Mumbai stays in unauthorized housing since independence. That itself is indication of the kind of thing with growth, with GDP, with income levels going up, but in spite of the fact that people are willing to move there. More than half these people who live in jhopatpattis have homes in their villages. So they have homes in their villages, but I would prefer to live in jhopatpattis because the income stream comes from the city. So their employment and other things will come into the city and not into those areas. That is what has happened. So that's the first thing which we need to do. And the paradigm change is going to take place because the Prime Minister of this country has directed that by 2022, we will have housing for all, which means a deficit of 1 crore houses or 10 million houses in the entire country in the urban areas will be fulfilled. 1/3 of this is already work has started. So if you see the deficit in terms of housing in the entire country, in the urban situation, almost 70 to 80% of the cities will be able to fulfill these targets, at least at the construction stage, by the year 2022, with the exception of certain cities like Mumbai, where unfortunately we have not been able to have sufficient land for the purposes of this development. So the city of Mumbai may in fact be the last position in order to make up for the deficit in terms of the affordable housing which the Prime Minister has been looking for the purposes of creation. So that's one part of the whole story. The second part of the story is the infrastructure of Mumbai. And this is something where the new paradigm is going to take place or is taking place in the city of Mumbai. And that's the wonderful story that we are seeing in the last 3 to 4 years, which a paradigm has taken place. And I'm going to take the words out of Mrs. Bhide's mouth, because the sea change has been remarkably done by MMRDA in the city of Mumbai. We have today 190 kilometers of Western Railway, Central Railway, and Harbour Line. The government of Maharashtra and the government of India put together are adding 235 kilometers of new metro in the next 5 to 7 years, which means that they are going to more than double the entire metro network in the next 5 to 7 years. So since independence, last 60, 70 years, we've had hardly 19 kilometers of additional metro lines in terms of what has happened. And in the next 6 years, you're going to see more than doubling of the metro train, which is going to take place. Because today, even today, almost 55% of the people use the railway for the purposes of transport in the city of Mumbai. So transport is the second paradigm which is going to take place into the city of Mumbai. The third paradigm is the fact that more space is going to be made available. And Mumbai, being an island almost in the city, hardly connected at the top end, is going to see 2 more connections which are going to take place. One of the connection which you have is the Cross Harbour Bridge, which is called the MTHL, which will cover the mainland of the country, which means right from Navi Mumbai to Panvel to Karjat, we will be adding as much land which is available in the whole city of Mumbai to be add-on for the purposes of development and infrastructure and this. So whatever land is available in Mumbai, there's hardly anything, but in spite of that, the entire land, built or unbuilt, which is available today, will be available in an unbuilt fashion, right from Navi Mumbai up to Karjat, which will be connected over there. And at the center of that, we will have the Navi Mumbai Airport. So from here to Navi Mumbai Airport, after the MTHL bridge is connected, you will be able to reach in 30 to 40 minutes by your car. And of course, I hope the metro will also be connected by that time, or any other way to do. We also have a connectivity with a ro-ro vessel which will go to Mandwa. So even the southern part of Raigad district will open up to tourism and other things. So instead of going to Goa, in 20 minutes, you'll be able to put your car in a ro-ro connectivity before the end of 2019. This is a miracle. So before 2019, you can take a car, go up to Gateway of India, get it into a ro-ro vessel, go to Alibag, and you have the entire area opening up over there. So the beaches of Alibag and others will be now available, much more easier, and also connectivity to Goa. If you want to do, you'll save 1.5 hour of driving distance if you decide to go by car. This is the second change which we are going to see. The third major change that I see is also the infrastructure of the rest of the road network which is taking place. So connectivity by the coastal road on the western side, and also the east-west connectivity, the Goregaon-Mulund link road, and the other connection roads which are taking place are going to make the mobility quite different in the next couple of years. That is going to do, there's a prospective tunnel which will come from Borivali to Thane, which is being proposed by the MSRDC in which the study is going on, and also you have the others. If you look at the total investments into urban infrastructure, which is going to take place in the next 6 years, it totals, as far as the figures which we have been able to get, comes to 275,000 crores, which is about 30 billion US dollars. And just for your information, the total investment by the central and state in the city of Mumbai in terms of transport in the last 70 years was not 3 billion. I repeat, not 3 billion. So 3 billion in 60 years for the city and the periphery of Mumbai in terms of transport and communications, and 30 billion in the next 6 years to add on to the sea change which is likely to take place. And most of the works are already on. The tunneling is on, where the metro will take off right from the southern tip of Mumbai up to the international airport, and then, of course, towards the northern side, where the other connections are also expected to take place. So these are the type of sea changes which are going to take place in that. So a lot of deficit still there. I believe that that's the opportunity, because when you don't have something, there's an opportunity to do it. So I see that change taking place. What I don't see fast enough happening is water. And I think that's a real challenge for the city of Mumbai, because up till today, though proposals have come and gone, the treatment of water, sewage discharge which takes place in the sea has not happened. And let me show off a little bit about my own company. For the last 20 years, both in the projects of Powai and Thane, we recycle 4 million liters per day plus in each of these projects, and use this recycled water for the purposes of gardening, construction, all the other activities, air conditioning, and so on and so forth. The entire city of Mumbai, all the city of Mumbai does not cycle 8 million liters of water for the purposes of reuse in this city. I'm talking about the city government of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai. The reason has been that they did not think it was necessary to do so, because the oceans were there, and that has happened, and historically that has continued. That now is being mandated to make the change. So that is one of the reasons why the sea around the Mumbai city is still in such a denigrate condition, though the municipal corporation has put up proposals for changing and recycling these waters. But the alternate use of this water in terms of getting it back for the purposes of reuse is still not even on the planning stage. So I think that's a necessity, because we would be able to use 30% less water from the dams and other places if we could recycle this water and use it for flushing, use it for our maidans, gardens, all the other places that are required, including commercial users, air conditioning and other things. Water would be a major issue, which I think the city of Mumbai needs to now focus on and say recycle, recycle, reuse, and replenish. Because the shortage of water in the next couple of years, with the kind of coming in of population, there is no way that we will be able to get adequate amount of water in 2060 that we are talking about, unless we don't get into the proposition of doing this kind of thing. The most important part, which I feel Asia society really has taken up this issue, and I'm very proud to be on this pedestal to share these thoughts with you, is that we should be able to influence thought and policy. And that, I think, is extremely important for us to do. But we have to congratulate the government of today for the simple reason that they have been able to take up some of these major projects and scale it up. The scalability of the projects which have taken place is humongous. The next point that is very important, which is happening today, is connectivity. So 2, 3, 4 things have happened. The first thing is the airport has got limited space, so we have the Navi Mumbai airport, which is expected to come up in the next 4 years. The second is the sea connectivity. You will be seeing ocean liners and others coming into Mumbai. They've already started, but you're going to see hundreds of ships coming in here and from people from India using the ship liners for the purposes of travel and seeing other countries, something which was not happening till 2 years ago. So all that has restarted. So both from the airport, land, and this has happened. The third connectivity is national highways. When this, since 2014 till now, the major difference has been that the country was constructing about 3 kilometers of national highway per day. Today, we construct almost 27 kilometers of national highway per day. For Mumbai, the two important connectivities which are going to happen is Mumbai-Delhi. That's the road line which is proposed. The second is the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, which is the railway connectivity line, which is going to make a paradigm difference. The bullet train, of course, which is connecting to Ahmedabad. And I think these are the further connectivity changes which are taking place quite rapidly. So if you add 2,75,000 crores for the Mumbai infrastructure, 80,000 crores of rupees for the bullet train, or 60,000 crores of rupees, and the Mumbai-Nagpur, which is another 30 to 40,000 crores of rupees of projects, I'm quite happy and surprised to know that this kind of thing in infrastructure is available or going to be available very soon in India. And most of this acquisition is taking place quite rapidly, and works are going on quite at a rapid pace. So I think all these changes for urbanization of India is really taking place in a substantial sort of way. Water, I've mentioned. Housing, I've mentioned. The public-private partnerships between the government in terms of housing has taken place in the country, but it's not taking off very fast. In the last 2 years, there have been a lot of financial changes which have taken place by demonetization, the real estate regulatory bill, which is really cleaning up the real estate industry, GST, where modification took place just 30 days ago. All these factors have actually slowed down the housing sector. But it's expected that in the next 3 to 6 months, that paradigm in the private sector will also take place. So that will also rapidly take off again in the next segment that is going to take place. All these aspects of it are extremely interesting for the next couple of years which will take place. And I think I'm pretty excited to do it. The next important factor in Mumbai is redevelopment and clearance of slums. I just happened to be on the drafting committee of the slum rehabilitation policy, which took place 15 years ago. And the whole concept was quite different than what actually got implemented when we realized that there was more politics into the redevelopment than actual walk on the talk in terms of the ground reality. And I'm glad that in some segments, government has really taken the bull by the horns in the case of Dharavi redevelopment, where they have taken themselves this responsibility with certain things and taking place. I think the policy has not worked successfully, or I would say it has failed miserably, simply because we have been able to, in 15 years, only solve problems of 1% of the slum population of Mumbai. And that's a miserable thought. I think the industry and the private sector is equally at fault, but I think politicians at the grassroots level should take a substantial blame for actually interfering in many of these projects as they are going about. So I think somehow or the other, the policy of redevelopment of slums is failed. The policy on redevelopment of individual buildings is working much better. And now the policy for individual societies to carry out the redevelopment on the private sector, I think will take off with the new policies which have come in the recent past. The next important factor is the concept of urbanization. 30 years ago, or maybe 40 years ago, MMRDA decided that Mumbai should be decommercialized. The idea was that no commercial or factory should continue in the city of Mumbai. And so for many years, the policy was reversed of pushing commercial and industrial activity outside Mumbai. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later, everybody realized that that was a wrong decision, and that decision by MMRDA was reversed. Because unless the GDP of the country and of the cities happens with growth of commercial, education, health, hospitality, and all these make a vibrant city. This policy having been reversed, commercial activity has been regenerated, and this part of it has been further enhanced by the new development control rules, which have been effected now in Mumbai, which actually brings about to bring commercial operations back to Mumbai. So while industrial operations, which was the keystone at the time of independence, cotton, textile, and other factories which really ran the roost in the first 20 years after independence, moved out of the city because of cost and other escalations, non-availability of labor, and other escalations which took place. Commercial activities, both on the financial side, we see leaders from finance over here who have built all these commercial enterprises, financial enterprises, and of course, a large number of activities on the commercial side came. IT and other activities also got energized. So a large amount of occupation and employment took place into this sector. So the regeneration of the city has taken place to such an extent that Mumbai today contributes 30% of the center and state's exchequer of India. So if you take the Mumbai Port Trust and the JNPT Port Trust, the two ports now conduct 30% of the entire import and export activity of the country. Today functions from between BPT and JNPT just at the Mumbai harbor. So you can see that with the GDP growing up, employment moves up, the quality of life needs to be maintained. All the activities which you have been talking about in Asia Center, you definitely need to improve, because you just can't have GDP growing with income levels going up, but the quality of life being subdued and coming down. And that is the new paradigm that we need to do. So while the wealth of the nation comes up, middle class has grown tremendously, which you can see overtly in the city of Mumbai and the suburbs and the extended suburbs and all the activities that is taking place. I am very excited. I'm very happy. I see this paradigm taking place. We have a lot of deficiencies, but that is a story I want to share with you. About 15 years back, I was traveling by Swiss Air to Zurich, and I had somebody on the flight, a Swiss gentleman on the plane with me. And he told me, and we started talking, and I asked him, what are you doing in India? So he says, I come 5 days every month to come to India. I said, why do you come to India 5 days every month? He says, I work on power plants and these activities, and I connect Swiss companies with Indian companies. And now I connect them with other activities of projects in India. But I said, but don't you have enough activity in Europe? He said, no, you all don't have homes, you don't have roads, you don't have airports, you don't have power, you don't have enough hotels, you don't have enough all these other activities. For us in Switzerland, we don't need so much more. The business is all in India. So while I love to live in Switzerland, I come here every month to do business and pick up business in India, because the future of the entire world is in India and China. So the opportunity of doing business is going to be in this country. As you mentioned, we'll have the biggest population in the country, with the demographics being what it is, and it is true. But if you take the right direction of how you mold the environment of the country, the opportunity of growth through there, whether education, whether hospitality, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in others, money is not of consequence. The consequence is of leadership. The consequence is of making projects viable. Recycling of water is effective, making money. We use that water effectively for commercial uses. All these aspects of solid waste management can be used, recycling all the material can be used for the purposes of using these materials again and doing it, creating power and those factors in hand. So while India being the center of the world, not just a part of the world, but the center which the entire world wants to invest, to come into this country and do it. But we need at the same time to see that the quality of life of the people of our country, and for those who come to come here and be with us, should be of a fantastic quality. We have made a great beginning, and I'm sure that with the leadership that we have, with the work that you are doing just now in terms of Asia Society, of disseminating these ideas, how to make it grow faster, how to catch up with the deficit of whatever is not done by the country. And this can be done. We also need to say that it is good economics. You will make money by making better countries. You will make money by the doing it. Don't only say that it is good. It is not only good, it is fantastic, because automatically the health of the people will improve, your quality of life will improve. So we just don't want to create wealth. India will create a lot of wealth. I'm not worried about that. But I am worried that the ideas of these kind of activities which is there, which will make a greater India better than the best in the world to come over here. In the case of telecom, we leapfrogged other technologies. We were ahead of the United States in bringing in the highest technology in terms of mobile phones, ahead of the United States in the entire country of India, and we are continuing to do so. So why can we not do and leapfrog in every other sector that is there? All of you are here who will be able to do it, and I promise you, I'm looking forward to the next couple of years. I wish I was younger so I could see it and enjoy it in a much bigger way. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I feel very happy to be with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hiranandani, for that positive and encouraging address. Now, before we get started with the panel, I'm going to ask the audience two questions. Got to wake everybody up if anybody's sort of... No. The moment I said it, I knew I had misspoken. Okay. Do you think, and show of hands, yes or no, do you think the metro will considerably ease the traffic in Mumbai? Great. Loudly. Okay, great. Second question. Do you think the coastal road will ease traffic in Mumbai? All right, I think you have... I got the reaction I wanted. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. We have with us Dr. Ishar Judge Ahluwalia. She's one of the country's leading economists and serves as the chair of ICRIA. And she was the chairperson of the high-powered expert committee on urban infrastructure and services between 2008 and 11. And her research has focused on policy-oriented challenges facing the Indian economy in the areas of urbanization, sustainable public service delivery, macroeconomic issues, and industrial growth and productivity. Welcome, Ishar. And we have the great pleasure of hosting Ashwini Bhide here this afternoon. She's an officer of the Indian Administrative Services, and in her tenure of 23 years, she has worked on some of the key transport projects. So all of us Mumbaikars are very thankful for that. Eastern Freeway, elevated road to the international airport, and now the Mumbai Metro 1 project as the managing director of the Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation. And we also have with us Gordon Falconer, who's a smart city consultant, property and infrastructure developer, and a city developer working as global director of smart cities at Schneider Electric, based in Singapore. And he has worked as the head of strategy at Masdar City in Abu Dhabi, and he's also the chairman of the advisory board for the UN United Smart Cities program. And our moderator for this afternoon is Reuben Abraham, and he's the founding CEO at IDFC Institute, which is a Mumbai-based think do tank, focused on state capacity and political economy. He was formerly at the Indian School of Business, and he's a non-resident fellow at the Marin Institute at New York University, senior fellow at Milken Institute, and an honorary advisor to the New Zealand government at the New Zealand Asia Foundation. So may I invite all the panelists to the stage, please?
Bunty, thank you very much, and thank you to Asia Society and AECOM for hosting this very important discussion. While we were chatting before we started, Gordon dared me to not throw the usual urban numbers out while setting context. So I'm going to try and come up with a different set of numbers that perhaps the audience hasn't heard. And I think the important number to sort of focus on is that this whole urban number of India itself may be a problem, because how urban you are depends on how you define the term urban. So what you actually find, and especially once you start using advanced technological means like using satellite data to look at built-up area in India, you're actually seeing that the urban numbers in India may be significantly higher than the 31% that is being reported by the government. Now keep in mind the fact that even if you look at official statistics of the government, that they have two numbers, which is 26% and 31%. So effectively what you mean by that is there is the population of Italy caught between two definitions used by the central government, right? So that's the sort of conundrum that you're sitting with. I think the other sort of thing that I think people don't fully appreciate is just the contribution of cities in GDP terms, right? So if I were to tell people in this room that Tokyo is actually bigger than Canada, is bigger than Turkey, is bigger than Spain, as in GDP terms, it's bigger, right? And these numbers over time have actually become less and less interesting. So if you looked at these numbers, say in 2004, you'd have found that Tokyo was actually bigger than Russia, right? These are mind-boggling numbers, right? And that's really why the urban conversation and why cities are so damn important. So when the Maharashtra government and the government of India basically says that Maharashtra should become the first trillion-dollar economy, which is, again, it may sound fantastical to people, but it's not. I mean, you know, there are cities that are bigger, that have economies that are larger than $1 trillion. The state of California is well over $2 trillion. So it's well within the realm of imagination that Maharashtra could get to $1 trillion. But the important thing to remember here is for Maharashtra to get to $1 trillion, Mumbai has to either double or triple its size in pure GDP terms. And that's the conversation that, you know, that we're basically having. And yes, while the topic says Mumbai, I think Mumbai is a symptom of a sort of deeper urban breakdown in the country. So I think we should address the larger set of issues, because it's just as important to address that as to address the very sort of local issues in Mumbai. So the way we'll do this is we'll basically have, I'd say about 45 minutes of panel discussion up here, and then we'll invite questions from the audience. But because we're running on a tight schedule, I really beg the audience to to stick to questions, not statements, and keep it really, really short. So Isha, let me start with you, because you've been working on these issues for a fairly long time. And I think some of this is, you know, we don't understand the history of this. I mean, how did we end up where we are? I mean, why didn't urban get the importance that it needed for the, say, last 70 years?
Well, thank you. First of all, thanks to Asia Society for giving me this opportunity to sit in this group and share my ideas. I must tell you that I am not an urban specialist, but I've been working on urban challenges for the last 10 years, forced into it by being made chair of a committee on urban infrastructure and service delivery. Why have we ignored urban for so long? First, of course, that we were an agricultural economy, dominantly an agricultural economy when we became independent. Then we were growing at such a slow pace that we didn't really see much by way of industrialization, rapid growth of industry and services. And it's really in the last 20 years that we have seen rapid growth, migration from rural to urban areas. And even then, we are nowhere near the level of urbanization that you would expect for an economy which is growing that fast. So that's one. Second, because we didn't take many things that Gandhiji told us seriously, but one thing our politicians really did, and that was to say that India lives in its villages. So our politicians have just got it in their head that India lives in its villages, and the votes are all in the villages, and they will make sure that this will remain that way. And why I say that is because last time we had our legislative constituencies redefined was in 2008 by the order of the Delimitation Commission, and that used the population census of 2001, by which it means that urban population is 28% of the total population. Today, when you and I go to vote for the general elections, only 28% of urban India is speaking, whereas I believe that actual urban percentage in total population today is more close to 40%. So we don't get urban voice because, the politicians and all parties have been part of this conspiracy that urban is not represented.
So let me just ask a further question to that. So, so according to the satellite numbers and so on that we've been running, that number is actually closer to 50%. Exactly. It's not 40%. Now, so it's true that by an administrative boundary mechanism, yes, people are still technically in rural areas, but there's something else that's changing, which is people are migrating. And when people are migrating, they are migrating most likely to improve their lives, right? So why is it that, so if you look at around the country and you look at the one constituency that is not spoken for politically, it's actually the urban constituency. Nobody cares about urban voters at some level. How do you make this issue more politically salient? Because otherwise, we won't get the outcomes we need.
Well, there are two other factors which come in the way. What happens is that this migration comes onto the fringes of your existing cities. So you have these peri-urban areas. And the census actually defines these areas as towns, but the state governments refuse to recognize them as towns. Because in our two-tier constitution, the third tier was recognized for the first time with the 74th Amendment in 1992. And today, census would say that 2,500 areas have become towns, they've become urban between 2001 and 2011. But when you look at how many the state governments have notified, it's less than 250. So the remaining, 2,000 towns do not have a statutory urban local government which can articulate the demands that urban India can make. Right. And on top of that, you talk to, I've had this from Mr. Nitish Kumar, Chief Minister of Bihar, when I said to him, why do you not give these towns an urban municipal, call them Nagar Panchayat instead of Gram Panchayat? And he says, when I try to do that, these people come back to me and say, let us be Gram Panchayat because there is more money in being a village than being a town, given all the schemes that the government has. That's one. Second, the regulatory structure is such that industry would much rather go and operate In the peri-urban area, they have less regulations, less encumbrances. All these factors play in to have an unplanned ad hoc urbanization where the infrastructure that Mr. Hiranandani talked about is actually being built by the private industry in order to make itself viable. Do you know that in the GDP figures of 2011-12, 51% of manufacturing is in so-called rural areas? So that's the reality on the ground of how urban India is trying to get the attention of the polity. The politicians are beginning to talk, they are not acting to work for planned urbanization.
Right. So again, to throw out one of those numbers that is truly interesting, you can actually map out panchayats in this country which have a population of over 50,000 people, right? So a population of 50,000 but being governed as if they were villages, right? For the reasons that Isha just outlined, which is that the money is one part of the issue. The other part of the issue is the fact that you don't actually have to give services. Some of the vital urban services do not have to be provided if you are actually an urban area. So, Ashwini, let me come to you, because again, you've worked on cities and infrastructure for some time. I think one mistake that we typically make is that, and I think part of this is because the elites make decisions. And so the elites have choices in terms of what to do in a city, but cities are primarily labor markets, right? People come to cities because they want jobs. Transport is actually one way to connect these labor markets. So considering the congestion factor of certainly the large Indian metros, what does an ideal public transit mechanism look like, especially when you look at the fact that people are basically trying to get from work to home, and so on and so forth?
I think all over the world, cities have gone for the metro transport, which is actually typically an urban transport. Whereas what Mumbai had was a suburban rail system. It was basically connecting to different municipal areas within the metropolitan region. And if you just see the city of Greater Mumbai, the main intention was not to connect the different suburbs of the city of Greater Mumbai. So the entire city and its the land use pattern, everything is defined by this 150-year-old suburban rail network. And unfortunately, we have not added anything to it, except maybe in that 11-kilometer long first metro 4 or 5 years back, and a small stretch of 8 kilometers of monorail. And the city grew outside that. Because earlier, everything was defined by the suburban rail network, where should be the CBD, where the people are residing. And it was very, well-defined kind of movement or commuting in the city, and which was supported by the BEST bus system, which used to be complementary to that. And almost the same number of people used to travel on BEST buses. But today, there is a huge gap. Because in the meantime, the city grew up, a lot of lands got unlocked. This maybe the mill lands, even some of the Government of India lands, and the city grew outside the influence zone of the suburban rail system. And many parts were developed into commercial centers, even the industrial centers. One huge MIDC is there in Andheri. But none of these areas which were providing or which are still providing employment, and daily so many millions of people commute to these places, they are not at all connected by any rail-based public transport system. And that's where I think we missed the point. We took it for granted that suburban system, which is carrying 8 million people every day for past many years, it is enough. It is adequate for the city. Whereas nobody realized that the city grew out of it. And later on, what happened, the actual impact was on the supplementary transport system, which was being provided by the BEST buses. Earlier, if suppose 6 million people were traveling on suburban, the same number or slightly more was traveling on BEST for the last mile connectivity. But of late, that number has gone to 2.5 to 3.5 million people. It's not matching. It means the rest of the people are taking private transport, some para-public transport, and so the road started crowding up. And that is why the whole city got messed up. The earlier pattern of CBD in a particular direction, and then people commuting in one direction in the morning and another direction in the evening, that entirely got disturbed. 4 or 5 more CBDs got up. We developed BKC without any rail-based public transport connectivity. So many other business centers came up. The whole mill land got developed, but without any public transport connectivity. And that is why probably the whole narrative went wrong. And earlier the concept where Mr. Hiranandani also mentioned about this mill lands. What was the concept? Wherever the mill lands, the chawls was around that. So it was walk to work.
Walk to work, yeah.
That concept has completely gone haywire. And at the same time, because of the natural and artificial reduction in land supply, people are not able to find houses in the city. So they are going to stay far away from the city, whereas they have to commute to city everywhere, and not only in one particular CBD, to multiple CBDs. So I think that is somewhere the complete neglect of public transport. We in fact closed down the tram which we had. So that whole concept, and again when you started thinking, we just started thinking about it 2004, when the first Metro Master Plan was prepared. And now you can imagine how difficult it is to implement all these projects. So this complete lack of expansion and complete neglect of rail-based public transport, which is the mass rapid transit system, probably has created this problem in Mumbai.
So implicit in your comments is also this notion that planning, certainly the planning paradigm that we've used, is a static planning paradigm. So the fact that the economy has changed, we are no longer a textile-driven economy, it's a financial services are probably the large part of the... So how do we sort of move from a paradigm of sort of static planning to a more sort of dynamic planning that takes into account the fact that the economy keeps changing? That's one part of it. And the other part of it is, if we were to simply ask the question of how many planners in this country actually have had a training in economics. And this is why I think the importance of the notion that cities are labor markets, which is why it's important to understand the underlying economics of it. And the fact is most planners don't get that training. So how do we change the planning paradigm?
Planners having that understanding is one thing, but whether our whole administrative and political system has that understanding is another thing. Because how are cities planned? And ultimately how these plans are put to implementation. We have just one DP, that is development plan, and one set of development control regulations. Whatever other discussion which happens on planning, it is elsewhere. That hardly get reflected in the development plan. Maybe at the time of preparation, when so many experts and so many planners are part of that preparation and part of creating a philosophy or theory for planning how the city should be in next 10 years or 20 years, that time it may be happening. But in the process, what happens? By the time the development plans are approved, the whole original narrative completely goes haywire, and a lot of individual or demands from certain groups creep in. They may be from the commercial sector, they may be from the real estate sector, from political sector, and what happens that long-term vision is somewhere gets missed out. And that is why cities are basically major labor markets, and what is important in the city is moving the people from one point to another. Then only the economic activity grows up, and then only the GDP grows up. That is something, somewhere it is missed out, and everybody starts thinking in silos. Probably the city thinks, the municipal corporation thinks that I don't want to add the supply of land because I don't have the capacity to serve that. I don't have enough public amenities, so I can't. If the FSI is more, if more built-up area is released, that will be a problem. Political narrative is how much I can give as much free housing as possible, so that is another thing. The probably bureaucracy and administration thinks that if I really release the built-up area, how much more revenue government earns. So in that process, everybody has a different objective, everybody has a different narrative, and what the city needs, how it is going to shape up maybe in next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that is missed out. So many plans have been prepared for Mumbai. Comprehensive transport study was done by MMRDA for the whole region. And we had these horizon years. What would happen in 2016? What would happen by 2021, 31? And all these investments which we are talking about, they were part of it. But ultimately, when all these things from drawing board, when they come down to reality, the kind of tools and legal or implementation framework which the city needs, that is not there. There is not one single dominant player who can have that overview of today and maybe next 20, 30 years and actually push things. That doesn't happen. Things are happening in fragments, things are happening in silos, and that is basically creating problem for the city.
So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but since we have only one representative from the government on this panel, so isn't part of the problem also that we overreach. So for instance, when China set up its special zones, China set up 4. We start with hundreds. So when we talk about smart cities, for instance, where is the need to set up 100 smart cities? I mean, couldn't we just do, say, 5 smart cities and actually demonstrate that it works, which then provides an example for everybody else? Why is it that we, so give, and this is especially since you're perfectly aware of this as a government official, given the capacity constraints inside of the government, why do we reach for the sky?
That is again the problem of political narrative. If now I have to keep my officer shoes outside and say, because sometimes what happens, if we want to deny what has happened in the past, if we want to undo something which has already happened, we have to show that we can do much, much greater than what has been done. Then probably suddenly the narrative changes and we want to show certain things at one go. And that is why probably we have this basically attraction for huge numbers. Earlier also, because now I have almost 24 years of experience in government, any new scheme is launched, we used to do in pilot. First have a pilot project, get a feedback. It may not be perfect, but still you will get some feedback, then make necessary tweaking, and then go ahead. But if you start with a huge number without understanding whether we have that much of capacity, that becomes a problem. So we may have very good intention, we have very good objectives, but ultimately when it comes to delivery, there is a problem. So even same thing would happen probably in transport sector also. If we start everything together, there is a huge capacity gap, and that we are facing, because there are the same consultants, there are the same engineers, same vendors, same suppliers, and today somebody is working, now AECOM is our consultant, I know AECOM is working on so many other projects, and the person who is working with Metro 3 may suddenly end up working in some other project, and we keep finding where are the experts, because this is the problem of doing everything together. So I think we can still rectify this, have the priority and have a long-term vision. Don't, politicians are probably have the luxury of thinking in this 5-year term, but maybe somebody has to go beyond that and has to say where the city is going to go 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. If we do everything together, there is going to be a problem. And somebody has to take stock of the situation every, within certain time limit, and look where exactly we are and where exactly things are going.
Gordon, let me bring you into because I mentioned the buzzword smart cities. So, I mean, what's your generic sort of take on smart cities? So the reason I'm asking this is, aren't there underlying problems that need to be sorted, some of which Ishar and Ashwini have pointed to, before we bring in technology? Or is it that we are saying that technology is one way to solve some of these problems? I mean, how do you think about this?
Well, first of all, there's about 300 definitions of smart cities, and it grows daily. So to a certain extent, there is an assumption, yes, there's technology involved. But there's also other people who define smart cities as with some enabling technology, but also just really smart behavior and smart ways of doing things. So, you don't have to get too much hung up on the technology, but you're right, the technology comes in later sometimes, but also sometimes at the beginning, because technology is an enabler to what you want to get done anyway. And by the way, just in reference to what you were saying about the number of smart cities in India, when I was at Mazda and we announced a $20 billion budget for a smart city project, that's a shoot for the moon kind of announcement. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the government of India in any way by saying this, but when you make an announcement there's going to be 120 smart cities in India, it galvanizes the rest of the world to kind of come in and start saying, hey, we'd like to work with you, and etc. So, there is often benefit, and I saw the benefit. My phone started ringing a lot when the $20 billion budget was announced, I can tell you. So there's often a benefit for, a shoot for the moon anyway, as well as then having, say, demonstration cities or aspirational cities that can serve as a proof point. But when it boils down to it, smart cities is still just simply, it's almost a marketing banner in some ways, but it's a way of bringing things together in a narrative. So if you look at some of the cities if you look at Amsterdam, for example, or Singapore, where I live. They've been very good at bringing together all of the stakeholders from the top to the bottom and bottom to the top, and putting in an integrated plan under the banner of Smart City, and then actually getting on with it and doing, what the role of government in many ways is the 3 Ps, the programs, the policies, and the projects. And if everything's not integrated and disjointed, it's harder to get the policies flowing down to programs, flowing down to projects. And so a lot of cities and countries will use the smart cities concept, as a narrative and a wrapping to actually get that whole thing brought together in an integrated way.
So I guess my sort of point is maybe you are sort of getting at this because it's a useful tool as a narrative to coordinate as opposed to it's a thing by itself. Because I guess what worries me is this conflation of the word smart and digital, right? Because there's a lot of smart things you can do without being digital. So the question that I constantly ask when I'm in these discussions in Delhi, for instance, is how did Singapore get to be a great place to do business before the internet? Right? Because we seem to think that the internet is the solution to all of these problems that need to be sorted.
You were touching on some of the topics that were being discussed in terms of, especially with economics, with planning. I mean, in Singapore, the Economic Development Board works very closely with the URA. And so the EDB is the one that's calculating the way the labour market will change and grow, which segments will, whether biotech's the future or clean tech's the future, et cetera, and then they will get very close in with the Urban Redevelopment Authority, which is the urban planner. And so they're working very closely together. So at that point, yes, the URA may be more of a cadastral, cartographical kind of function, but they're working so tightly with the EDB that, in a sense, it's whether it's in a separate building, it doesn't really matter. So in that sense, they're bringing that holistic kind of thinking to it.
Isha, do you want to come in on this?
I just want to come in a little bit because I want to share with everyone here the definition of a smart city that I extracted from your Deputy Prime Minister at a similar seminar in Delhi when he very enthusiastically endorsed the 100 Smart Cities program of the Government of India. So I piped up and said to him that I've been asking several people, sending emails to London School of Economics, Stanford, Berkeley, saying, what is your idea of a smart city? And everywhere I get the reply saying different people mean different things by it. So since you, Deputy Prime Minister, come from the smartest city of all in the world, may I ask you what you understand by a smart city when you are very enthusiastically endorsing our program? And I must say, he gave me a definition which left me very satisfied. So I'm going to share that with you. He said, when in a city, people demand better public services from a government, and the government, with the help of administrative reforms and better technology, delivers these services in a transparent and accountable manner, that to me is a smart city. So he had woven in really a smarter way of putting what you were saying. Yeah. You know how URA and your other planners work on Singapore Smart City. I think we actually are using the term smart city wrongly. Yeah. And when you press the people in government, they will agree that what we are talking about is area-based development. You take an area in a city and you say you're going to change that area, you're going to improve that area with the help of technology. And there is not enough emphasis put on institutional change that is needed in order to deliver better performance. And we will always say Singapore is a disciplined country, but what we mean by discipline is we are not reforming our institutions. We don't have regulatory capacity. We don't have enforcement capacity. Technology alone will not be able to deliver unless we these. I'll end. I've kind of encroached in your area, but I just want to say the smartest city of all in India is a city which I would like to know, I'm sure you know about it, is Magarpatta. Have you heard of Magarpatta?
It's near Pune. Yeah. Near Pune.
It's near Pune. In fact, at Chicago Council of World Affairs panel discussion on smart cities, I put it to them, and they all said, we'll go back and check the website of Magarpatta. I said, that is a smart city. And I will encourage all of you who have not heard of Magarpatta to go see. It's not too far from Mumbai. And that is what we mean by a smart city.
Gordon, do you want to respond to anything that...
I totally agree with everything there. And it's actually a great definition, because if you think about it, the smart cities, have actually, and it's back to your point as well, have never claimed to be digital.
Yes.
None of them have. So Singapore's smart city program is called Smart Nation.
Yep.
And it's very much about the people. And even the city of Amsterdam, it's been called Smart City. And if you look at any of the developments around the world, none of them have called out the digital. But you're correct, though, that there's been this kind of, I won't call it hijacking, but part of the discussion has kind of devolved into this, you throw sensors around, you get the data, you monetize the data, and bingo, your problems go away. No one's actually done that.
I think part of the problem is because it's offering a shortcut around the deep institutional challenges that both of them are speaking to, right?
Yes, which have not gone
That's the
away.
attraction.
Yeah. And by the way, I should mention, 10 years ago when I first arrived in Singapore, I went to a planning meeting where a engineering infrastructure company called AECOM was presenting a major master plan vision to the Singapore government. And the heads of all the agencies were in the room. And at the end of it had been a week of big idea pitching. The heads of the agencies just said, okay, looks good, let's go ahead. Yep. That's kind of the secret sauce. Yep. You actually had a integrated government approach, very good advice from AECOM, and the will and the desire to do it, and they had the right ideas and the right plans. But it was without what I'm hearing about, these wonderful definitions of cities versus villages versus the issues that a lot of countries and cities have, which is stakeholders not being in alignment, right. Had gone away in that instance. So.
Right. Ashwini, let me come to you now with a slightly more mundane set of questions, which is, managing complex infrastructure the way you do is very, very sort of hard. And so how do you deal with issues around dislocation, not in my backyard, all of these kind of issues that come up? And just to give some context to this, I read this really fascinating story about the Opera House, the Royal Opera House in Mumbai, when it was built. And there were severe complaints about the building of the Opera House because it was like it would increase traffic, the horses would basically defecate on the streets. There's a whole list of complaints. And today, we look back and it's a heritage building, right? And that all of Mumbai is actually very proud of. But if you actually go back in history and look at it, there's this whole litany of complaints. So the underlying tension there is obviously everybody wants better infrastructure, but don't want to live through the process by which the infrastructure is built, right? So how do you deal with these kind of, and also the dislocation issues?
See, I think everybody is a status quo. So if I'm living in my surroundings and which are all right for me, then I don't bother to see what is happening in the other parts of the city. But taking that typical attitude in mind, I think one has to plan the execution of infrastructure projects, because there is a reason why people have that feeling or that apathy to the infrastructure development, because they feel that when government does all these projects, they don't follow the timeline. There is no discipline in the way the projects are implemented. Most of the times the financial arrangement is not done. Halfway the project is there and the budget is over, and then by the time the new provision is made, the work remains in the same static way. And plus those who implement the projects, they are not much concerned about what is happening to people who are living in the vicinity. And that is why there is a grudge all the time, apart from being status quoist. Secondly, there are people who actually get impacted by the project, and that is why they also have a grudge. So I think when one decides to implement the project, earlier what used to happen, once you award the project, most of the times implementing agency used to think that, okay, our work is done, now the contractor will take over and he will do whatever it is. In fact, I remember, now I'm here almost for 10 to 12 years in this urban infrastructure. Earlier our contracts also used to say that everything is contractor's responsibility. This is how the contracts were framed, like getting all the clearances, taking traffic permissions, everything. And that is why there was no plan. Contractors will do in his own way. And that is why the first and foremost thing is to plan your project execution properly. So do things neatly, do things with more sensitivity so that you can actually tide over the misunderstandings, the apprehensions people have in their mind. And that's what we had tried to do in Metro 3 project. These are the learnings over a period of time. And we are, in this project, we are working in such elite areas where probably people had never seen this kind of governmental intervention. So they always thought that this is their area, their ivory tower, and why somebody is coming and creating problem for us. So there we had to have a different approach, go back to people again and again, constantly go for public consultation, be as transparent as possible in terms of information, manage your sites properly, take care of the traffic diversion and the pedestrian facility. Try to take all environmental control measures like the dust control, keeping your site clean, having a good housekeeping, and then have constant dialogue with people. And with that, I have seen in last 2 to 3 years, we have actually changed people's approach towards this project. The another category is those who are actually getting affected, getting impacted, because the lands in Mumbai are not encumbrance free, which are even reserved for projects in development plan. And there, because of the housing problem, as has already been said, that more than 60% people live in slums, and most of these slums are either on government land or private land, which are reserved for projects. So we have to take care of them, and for that, one needs to have a robust rehabilitation policy. Fortunately for Mumbai, because of World Bank's insistence for MUDP project, some such policy came into being, and we have used it in last 10 years in such a way and evolved it further. So once you ensure that these project affected people are rehabilitated in the vicinity in a proper way, and some handholding also is required to be done. Because most of these people shift from the horizontal slum structures to vertical buildings, which they are not at all used to. So we faced a lot of problems initially. So since beginning, we have a post-rehabilitation team to even make them aware that how these buildings are to be maintained, and a lot of hand-holding is done. So basically, again, you have to look at these problems with sensitivity, but at the same time, you have to have that alternative housing available. And Mumbai, we have some certain provisions in development control regulations. They were not very extensively used. MMRDA did use it. Even for Metro 3, we used it, and the allotment is done in a transparent manner. So basically, sensitivity and transparency in your procedure and your information, that is the key issue. And just one thing I want to highlight. For all this time, we used to rehabilitate only slum structures for projects. But this time, for the first time in Mumbai, for any infrastructure project, we have to demolish legally owned private buildings, and we have to take care of the rehabilitation of the tenants. In Girgaon and Kalbadevi, which is the most, the oldest and the densest neighborhood of Mumbai, there to have these 2 stations. Because we can't do, it can't happen that these stations are not there, because that whole area is poised for revival. Not today because of various constraints, but these stations will be game changers. And to build these 2 stations in that narrow congested neighborhood, we had to demolish 20 properties, 30 buildings, more than 700 people had to be displaced. Now there is absolutely no fixed policy framework for that. There is a 33(7) regulation which is there for the redevelopment of SEZ building, but this was not fitting into this. So we worked on it. Again, what mattered was public consultation. We spoke to each and every person, understood their apprehensions, what exactly they want. then engaged a specialized consultant, worked with him, prepared a in-situ redevelopment plan, went back to government, told them that we want a policy change here for the cluster development of some such land parcels which are not contagious to each other. Government, we got it approved and then sat with people, and we spent almost 2 years on this, and finally by way of negotiation, because we had to deal with owners and the tenants and their aspirations, and we have come up with a plan. Even today we are struggling with that because we can't satisfy each and every person, but I think one has to have a patience, look through things and don't leave it, because at one point of time it was looking almost impossible to have these 2 stations. But today we have demolished this building, started the work, shifted these people, but everything was done in public consultation, in an inclusive kind of approach, taking people in confidence and honoring whatever their acceptable demands and keeping the transparency. This is how it is.
So let me ask you a related question, which is not Mumbai related, but is more transportation related, which is, so for the longest time, this country didn't invest in urban infrastructure and certainly not in transportation infrastructure. And now we've swung the other way to go and invest in the most expensive infrastructure, which is metro rail. So there are cities all over the country today building metro rails, and you have to ask yourself the question, is this actually needed for a city like this? Or are solutions like waterways, buses, etc., which actually don't involve the same amount of capital expenditure, is it a better sort of solution? How do you think about this?
I think sometimes what happens, if one project becomes a success in one city and people feel that that is how the politicians have gained out of it, then everybody starts demanding it. And then sometimes we lose the rational kind of approach to it. Actually, the cities which need metro the most, I think Mumbai was the most. Of course, Delhi required, because Delhi never had a robust public transport system. But the city like Mumbai or even Pune needs metro, because otherwise it is difficult to move people. And these are the cities where bus system are at least there, operational. But many cities in Mumbai, India are now demanding metro, where they have never even operated the bus system. So I think
and the population is not large enough.
Population is also not. And first of all, these are very heavily capital intensive projects. Maybe you can still manage the capital during construction because of the multilateral funding agencies and some funds coming from outside. But the operation and maintenance costs are also very high, and unless you have a robust ridership, you won't be able to sustain these kinds of things. Besides, what is happening, you can have 1 or 2 corridors which doesn't cover, connect all the nooks and corners of the city. So maybe some cities where immediately the metro is not required, first they need to have a robust bus system. Probably we are somehow neglected the bus system in India. Even in Mumbai, and instead of even investing so much on Mumbai, you give a free bus service in the city. That would also work actually, and push as many buses as possible on the roads, because sometimes people say, if buses are there, where will the cars go? The cars will automatically vanish if you really give a very efficient bus system. So it needs, now probably that rationalization will come, because we don't have that kind of money to support the metro system in all the cities.
So Ishar, I know you...
I just want to come in on this. Nowhere in the world a metro system can survive on its own.
Yes.
So what we really need to do is to develop these stations into...
value capture.
Yeah. That's very important. Second, I think I agree with what Ashwini has said, that, this is not a solution for every city, but I just wanted to pick up on another point of connectivity that you talked about earlier, that quite apart from building urban transport infrastructure for a city, India is at a stage, Indian economy is at a stage where we are going through a massive structural transformation, where villages are turning into towns, towns into bigger cities. We need connectivity all through. And what we need really is a metropolitan regional plan of connectivity. You go to Indore, and you find that a whole lot in Madhya Pradesh, you have a whole lot of these pharmaceutical factories in Devas or, other areas. And the factories are there, and all the people are living in Indore. They are putting the burden of urban infrastructure on the city of Indore. And, there are buses, bought by the companies that takes them there. The roads are not so good. So who is going to plan for a whole region which is coming up? And I was in California, And I went to visit the Bay Region Development Authority. There were at least 200 planners looking at how, and this is for a developed country, developed state, but they keep working on it to see which way development is going, which way we would like to channel it. So connectivity is much larger than just metro rail versus buses, but across the...
So you've preempted my question to you, which was, how do you... what you've basically described as overlapping jurisdictions and so on and so forth, right? So for instance, in Mumbai, you've got the trains, that is the central government, the buses are the state government, and somebody else is responsible for coordinating between all of these agencies. And then now what you're suggesting, which is absolutely true, which is metropolitan regions. And so are we talking about a sort of fundamental re-architecture of the governance structures that are required?
Actually, we should be talking about the fundamental restructuring of the governance patterns. Last night in Delhi, last evening, we had a launch of Dr. Y.V. Reddy's book on fiscal federalism. So we had, the chairman of the 14th Finance Commission, who was responsible for devolution of funds from the central government to the states. And the person commenting on that book was the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission that is currently at work. And what we have is a situation in which our municipal finances are in complete disarray. Municipal revenue as percent of GDP in India is 1%. And it has been declining over the years. So these facts should be really broadcast. And a city is not allowed to increase the user charge for, say, the delivery of water, even if they can convince their residents that they'll give better quality of service, if only they can charge a little more, because they need approval of the state government to charge more. Property tax is the major source of revenue for cities, and there have been at least half a dozen instances in the last 10 years where come an election and the state government announces that all properties below 10 lakh will not pay any property taxes. So if you are a municipal commissioner, you wake up one night with half your budget blown. So that's the reality. And when we talk about cities really developing infrastructure, there's no way that cities can pay for the capital expenditure of that infrastructure. We will find some way or beg, borrow, steal, the big daddy, the central government or state government pays for it. But then you have to operate and maintain it. If you can't even charge to cover the O&M cost of what it takes to run that infrastructure, then 20 years later you'll again come back and set up another committee to give you an estimate of what is the infrastructure gap for the next year. So, the governance patterns, empowering our cities to have a financial model which does not make them totally dependent. And I really mean it. Their own revenue was 51% in 2011-12. For 2018-19, it is 0.43. That's what we are talking about. And when you don't have a financial base, and these are the entities that are going to be the engines of growth.
Yes.
So it's a very serious matter, restructuring of federal fiscal frameworks,
yeah. Do you want to comment on this, Gordon, at all?
I'll probably back that up. Well, I can't top it, of course. But to back it up, though, absolutely, in the sense of, and you started in a sense with an oversight governance for a transport issue, and if you go to somewhere like the Netherlands, there is it's a voluntary body called the Randstad, which actually coordinates the transport between The Hague, Eindhoven, Amsterdam, and Rotterdam. And so it provides oversight and coordination, and mainly on trains, in particular, and transport and roads. But of course, yes, in most parts of a lot of parts of the world, transport is not even a city issue. So I come from Melbourne, and the transport is not a city issue.
Exactly.
The city of Melbourne only covers a few CBD office buildings. Yes, it gets to levy property tax rates on those properties, so it's quite wealthy because it's got a very small amount of land, but it's got quite a lot of revenue. But like many other places in the world, the cities are then, the municipal boundaries are little fiefdoms without any planning controls, and really their responsibility comes down to collecting waste and a few other things. But the real powerhouses are the cities where the state or regional authority is very much running the city, the bigger cities. So when you go to Barcelona, Catalonia is very much part of Barcelona, but equally the boundary of Barcelona is very big. So as a city, it's not broken up. It's got a lot more power. So the bottom line is, yes, the governance is kind of crucial to the way things work.
So, just a small thing that here the culprits are the state governments. Yeah. Because the state governments want to sit at the high table with the government of India and say we are talking of cooperative federalism. But when it comes to further decentralization, they don't want to move an inch. I just wanted to clarify that.
For obvious reasons. I mean, the day you had an elected mayor of Mumbai, the power equation within the state will change dramatically. I'm going to come to the audience, but before I go to the audience, Ashwini, one last question to you, which is, and I think somebody touched on the land question, which is, so people always say that India, we lack land and so on, but actually if you look at around the country, there's massive amounts of underutilized brownfields land that's available. So if you try to create an inventory of land, you don't even know where to start. The defense, railways, ports, all of these people are sitting on so much land, and we don't even know how to estimate the land, right? So how do you as a sort of government official, or I don't know, or in your independent capacity, how do you think about this issue of underutilized land, and how can we better utilize it?
Yeah, in the context of Mumbai, if you look at the land, actually overall the land supply is less too. Yes. But how much we are using it, that is also an issue. Underutilization. Yeah. Because it is completely underutilized, and there is land and there is buildable potential of that land. So both the things are underutilized, and you have very rightly said that a lot of land is there even with government departments, ministries. But unfortunately what happens, these are now, suppose defense ministry. Defense has a completely different objective and purpose. Whatever land assets they have, they don't think of it from the monetization or better or efficient usage point of it. So there are no enabling policies which are city specific. Now defense land in Mumbai or railway land in Mumbai, which is not being used, has a different meaning altogether. That land, if somewhere else outside Mumbai, could have a different usage. But in Mumbai, it could be used for so many other purposes. Many of these Government of India lands are encroached upon. But what to do with that? Because outside these lands, at least there is SRA policy, there is some redevelopment policy, but these policies are not applicable to these lands. So it is very true that while we are in short supply of land, but even whatever land parcels we have, they are not being put to proper use. Probably there are policies, but they are not applicable to each of these land parcels, because Government of India's Maharashtra's redevelopment policies or municipal corporations redevelopment policy or Mahada's policy is not applicable to these lands. So somebody has to think through this. If the lands, whichever ministry they may be belonging, but if they are within the boundary of a city, then the city's policy should be made applicable to that, which will automatically increase the land supply in that city, and that land, they can monetize that land. At the same time, land can be used for better and efficient use.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to come to the audience. We have limited time, so what I really need you to do is just state your name, your organization, and only a question. No statements, I will cut you off. So maybe we can take 3 questions to start with. I see in the middle, I see a bunch of hands up. If you can just identify yourself, organization, and question.
My name is Ishwas Tendulkar. I represent non-profit as well as profit. I have a question to Mr. Gordon. I find that having associated with the smart cities in India, the 100 smart cities, there's a lack of governance. In fact, there's a deviation from ISO. For smart cities, there's a ISO. Now, this is a deviation from the ISO. In case of, plus these companies who are formed.
Questions, please.
Yeah, the question is it the same situation in the other developing world? How the model is successful? Because in India, the model is not successful because of the lack of governance. Now, is that the same problem you are seeing as a vendor in the other developing world, not the developed world?
Okay, so wait a minute, Gordon. We'll just take a round of questions. Yeah, whoever's got the mic. I see a gentleman with this. Yeah.
My name is Prabhu. I come from Sona Group. My question is regarding Mumbai. Is there a need to have a different administrative structure for Mumbai, considering that it's the great GDP generator and requires a Niti Aayog of its own?
Yeah, okay.
Maybe looking at the other municipalities nearby too.
Fair enough. Just, where's the mic? Just give it to the gentleman in the suit, or the two of you can ask.
Hi, my name is Rohit. I am from U Chicago Trust. My question is to Ashwini ma'am that how participatory is the metro planning and how do you deal with the land ownership issues, if you can just say some narrative about that.
Okay, just keep the mic there because I'll come to you after this round of questions. Who wants to go first? Gordon, do you want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll just repeat the question back in the sense of you're asking about whether my opinion of the way the cities are measured using the ISO Smart Cities KPIs. Yeah, okay. The ISO Smart Cities KPIs came out of Toronto University many years ago when we were kind of one of the early attempts at trying to put in a set of KPIs. A lot of people overthink them in the sense of any of them. There's hundreds of KPIs for smart cities out there. So the organisation of the UN that I work with uses the ITU KPIs, which are different to the ISO KPIs. But when it boils down to all of them, effectively just simply a question. A set of questions, maybe 500 questions, 100 questions in different parts of the city. Now, they will be questions like number of deaths per 100,000, number of misdemeanors per 100,000. Then it will be number of homes connected by broadband, blah, 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 blah. And it goes through. And it's a very good way of getting an overall snapshot of a city. But at the same time, it's 32,000 feet up in the air when it really boils down to it. And I think they're useful. The UN and especially the NGO bodies really like them because they like to be able to sort of measure progress and everything. But they're very different to the livability indexes, for example, which companies like Mercer and the EIU run. So I guess all I'm saying is the ISO is one of, obviously it's ISO, so it's fine. But I wouldn't get hung up. There's so many other measures, honestly, and I'm an old property developer, so I look at things slightly differently as well. There's so many other measures that aren't in those sorts of indices that you may want to kind of bring into it, which are maybe more qualitative rather than quantitative. So there's nothing wrong with them per se, but just because you then have the same score for ISO in a city in India as you do for the city of Munich in Germany is not necessarily going to tell you a lot in many ways. Does that help?
Ishar, perhaps the governance question you can answer, whether we need to restructure the city government of Mumbai itself.
I think basically I do believe you need effective decentralization with new institutional structures. And Mumbai would be a very good case to begin. Yes.
Ashwini, the question that
Metro planning is substantially participatory because when the alignment is decided or frozen by the experts, then when it is published under Metro Act, there is a public consultation. Then multiple times during environment impact assessment, social impact assessment, public consultation takes place. Even for tree cutting, every regulatory activity which we do, public consultation takes place. Some of the positive suggestions are always taken into account, but some of the suggestions come out of the NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard, where we have to reason it out and convince people that this is not possible. As far as land acquisition is concerned, for Mumbai Metro 3, we have done the entire acquisition by way of negotiation. by making use of legal framework. But while deciding the compensation, we have gone by the new act, which is of fair compensation, and whatever is the maximum benefit the landowner can get, that has been decided, which is also by way of consultation. So 99% of land which we acquired, only one person didn't agree with it, and we had to go for compulsory acquisition.
Since the mic is right there, you can go ahead.
Hi, thanks. My name's Pranav, and I really enjoyed this discussion. I'm a student. My question is to Ashwini ma'am. Ma'am, how do we get the BMC to deliver what the Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation is doing, which is efficient public services? I mean, every day we see the daily charade of blacklisted contractors getting the same contracts, leading to even more bad public roads. So, I mean, while we are a flailing state, one state agency seems to be doing a great job, but the other agency is really not doing much.
Perfect. I think I saw a bunch of hands here. Yes, the gentleman here.
I am Ashok Datar. We are think tank Mumbai Environmental Social Network, which deals with the economics and management of road space. I have one question to Ashwini madam. We have got a very good network being built of metro, and you are doing a major part of that. At the same time, there is I see there's some road projects also. What I notice is that all road projects seem to be designed for private transport, and metro is the only one for public transport. I thought road also should have public transport thinking. In the entire DPR, coastal road, it did not have any public hearing at all, no public consultation at all. And not only that, they don't recognize that metros exist and that metros can also carry some people. So I don't know how to come across such kind of a glaring gaps between the two kind of modes of transport.
Super. I think there's a question right there, so if you can just ask. By the way, can I also just ask for some gender balance? Yeah, okay, I'll come to you. Fine. There's questions at the back, okay.
My name is Abbas Master. I was looking after Bhinde Bazaar upliftment project. My question is, Mumbai is not livable today. And in 2060, what 5 things you experts think are top priorities for us to meet the challenges of Mumbai?
Okay. So let's come to the panel. Ashwini, 2 of those questions. I suppose the underlying the BMC question is the larger question of why does the Indian government work so well in project mode, but the minute it goes to program mode?
That is the main point, what you said, because organizations like Mumbai Metro Corporations the goal is completion of the project, and we are geared up around that, whereas municipal corporation has many services to deliver, and their whole mode is not the project mode but the maintenance mode, and where plus the political counterpart is also there, so that is an issue. But it is one organization does something, the others also get influenced. So now if you see the even implementation of coastal road, you can see a lot of things are borrowed from Mumbai Metro. So I think it is good that organizations learn from each other. As far as this question is concerned, I think once the metro network is completed, probably even the bus system and other supplementary transport has to be reorganized, and probably a lot of space will have to be provided for them on the road, because once large amount of people shift from basically their private vehicles to metro, then for the last mile connectivity, the bus services will have to be revived in a redesigned and redefined manner. So probably that time all these roads will also be put to proper public transport use.
And the last question about the 5 things that we can do to improve, and I think we can just use Mumbai as a placeholder. I mean, what are the big things that you would recommend, Isha? I mean, I know you're not an expert on Mumbai, but I think it's a much more generic question.
Yeah. First and foremost, this is again a lesson I learned from Singapore, wastewater treatment and then drinking water. Because unless and until you do wastewater treatment, you are throwing away all the reuse possibilities, and for every 1 liter of water that you consume, 0.80 becomes wastewater. So you can see how important that is. So I would say wastewater, water, solid waste management. I don't know how many of you remember the days of Malad, when you had this office complex built on an unscientifically closed landfill, and you saw the consequences of that. Please go and check up in the internet what all happened. So solid waste management, mobility. And mobility not just through metro rails, but as Ashwini pointed out, whole multimodal mobility. So I would really say if you did these things right, you'll fix your air, you'll fix your water, you'll fix your soil, and you'll have better public health conditions.
Yep. And address climate change.
Yes, and you'll address climate change. Yes.
Again, one other sort of, because Mr. Dattar asked this question as well, one very interesting statistic out of London. So London has the second largest metro rail in the world after Tokyo. But even in a place like London, more people use the bus than the rail. And I think it's a very important piece to keep in mind while we do this build out of metro rail, that the rest of it is just as important. Okay, I'm going to go to the women in the audience. Yes.
Hi, my name is Karina and I'm a graphic design student at ISTI. And my question to the panel is, when imagining 2060, how does climate change factor in urban planning?
Okay. Do you want to direct that question to anybody, or?
I'd like all three to answer with their own perspectives.
Okay. Any other questions there? No, let me just ask the women and I'll come back to you. Yes, there's a question here.
Hi, I'm Anjali Tharapur from HDFC. I'd just like some views from the panel on land reclamation, because in Mumbai we're reluctant to do anything further, but we've got an outstanding example in Singapore. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? No, wait a second. Okay, I'll keep this as a gender-balanced set of questions.
Climate change is a good reminder, because when I started in smart cities 11, 12 years ago, it wasn't smart cities. It was eco-cities. It was green cities. And along the way, smart cities became a bit more trendy and popular, and the word green and sustainability seemed to disappear. So I think it's a timely reminder. I think, though, that if you look at what the UN does, in particular with the UN SDGs, they've been pushing those around the world heavily, still are. And if you look at some of the examples in Europe, in fact, from smart cities, the Covenant of Mayors, they actually give money out to cities based on improved energy reduction or increased renewable energy. So I think if smart is always entwined with sustainability, I think we'll be okay in the future. But you've got to keep putting carrot and stick kind of approach to cities, I think.
Ashwini, land reclamation?
Land, I mean, I'm not again an expert, but now we are thinking of land reclamation for the coastal road project. So by regulation, by law, land reclamation is not allowed in India, but for coastal road project, which is going not only for the purpose of coastal road, but it is also going to generate some large land parcels which would be used as open areas, recreational ground, for cycle tracks, and all these purposes. That for that particular purpose, this land reclamation is allowed. But maybe some more deliberation and thinking will have to happen if we can go the Singapore way, or we can explore those possibilities of having more area by going for reclamation. But today the opinion is divided in India on this, and what government could manage is only to get this permission for coastal road with specific purpose.
Okay, I'm going to come to this side of the audience. Yeah, the gentleman with the mic. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes, sir. My name is Nitin Goyal from Shoki Industries. We are civil contractors and doing some small works for Mumbai Metro underground stations for Line 3. Ma'am, my question to Ashwini, ma'am. Madam, the complaint about, or is it correct, the complaint that there is no interconnectivity, there's not much interconnectivity between the different corridors of Mumbai Metro? Mumbai 1, 2, 3, 4 corridors that you have. And the second question is, madam, you very correctly mentioned about the ridership being very important. So what are the studies that you have done to ensure, to guarantee that much ridership is going on? Or where's the viability gap funding going to come from? Are we non-users of metro? We have cars. Are we going to be subsidizing people who are going to use the metro? And what are the lessons learned from Reliance Metro? For the fare increase, you had to go to High Court, and there was so much confusion and blah, blah, about it. So what are those studies done? What is the minimum fare? 30 rupees is the minimum fare for 2 stations on Reliance Metro. What is your fare going to be from Colaba to Seeps?
Perfect. Yeah, please.
I am Vishwas Sarmukadam. My question is, villages adjacent to city has huge construction activity by the builders, as there is no regulation and town planning because Gram Panchayat is looking after that. Then that area suddenly comes under the municipal limit, putting all the burdens. So now what government is doing right now to control this? Because in USA, as rightly said by her, just behind the Facebook, NEVAC has been developed, but government near San Jose, that is between Union City and Fremont.
We just have to kill the question.
Yeah. So likewise, whether government is taking it.
I've got your question. Thank you. At the back, please.
Hi, my name is Neha. I'm an officer from Mumbai First, which is a think tank. My question is to Ashwini ma'am. Ma'am, what I heard from your conversation is that you're talking about last mile connectivity, activating BST, BRTS maybe, but is there any immediate solution to the problem right now?
Okay, and I'll take one last question. The gentleman in the jacket there with his hands up.
Yeah, my name is Avinash Abbengar. I just have a question for Ashwini ma'am. What is the government's projection up to 2030? How much population will travel by metro?
Okay.
Out of this?
Perfect. I think most of these questions are, yeah.
I'll just quickly reply.
Yeah.
There is a proper plan of connecting all these lines with each other. Like just to give you an example, Metro Line 2 will get connected to Metro Line 3 at BKC. Metro Line 1 will get connected to Metro Line 3 at Marol Naka. And similarly, the other metro projects, wherever they are intersecting the other corridors, of course, this connectivity won't be a very seamless connectivity as it happens in the underground section, but there will be a connectivity. Second question was about, you said that whether we will be subsidizing. I don't want you to subsidize, I want you to travel on metro. Exactly. Because that's the whole idea. The more travelers are there, the more viable the metro is going to be. And fare is going to be affordable, because even with the kind of fare structure Metro Line 1 is having, there are almost 4 lakh passengers traveling on that every day, because it is not the fare of that metro, it is also compared to the cost of the alternative mode of transport. And whenever the metro cost, traveling on metro becomes cheaper than alternate mode of transport, everybody will go on metro, which is a safer, more comfortable and faster mode of transport.
You want to address the last mile question? That was raised?
Last mile connectivity is separately being planned, because see, when we did first metro or first monorail, all these issues were only in discussion. But now we are now expanding the metro network so much that last mile connectivity is very much on the cards, and it is being separately studied by engaging special consultants, and how we can have the last mile connectivity not only by bus but other modes of transport, and how we can also have a soft integration. Work is also happening on the common mobility card, and by way of smart apps and involving other para transport, how we can ensure end-to-end connectivity and a total commuting, comprehensive commuting experience for the commuter, even though he is using multiple modes of transport.
Ishar, on the Gram Panchayat question, is that something you want to comment on? It's basically when Gram Panchayats basically, Gram Panchayats basically, cities expand into Gram Panchayats. How do they deal with it? I mean, do you have any, no is a perfectly legitimate.
No.
Okay. Do you have any closing thoughts, Gordon? I mean, you've done enough of these speeches to make it up on the spot.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing here, and what I've seen everywhere else as well, it's still coming back to honestly governance, and the ease of doing things. And I'm reminded of, I was in Delhi a few years ago doing a live case study with somebody from Mumbai, and this may be correct, hopefully, which was that the traffic lights, the smart traffic lights, the project itself was less than a year to put in, but to get them funded was 7 years, because there were some NGOs involved and everything. And it's that kind of reminder that when you're in an environment in Singapore where everybody gets around the table and says, yes, let's go ahead, or you're in another environment in Barcelona or Amsterdam or somewhere else in the world where they can just basically line their ducks up, as we say, and then just sort of get ahead. The governance is so crucial.
Absolutely.
May I just come back to that point, not so much in terms of construction, but for a long time we've been thinking of cities and then villages. So when it comes to dumping our waste, solid waste, we are not allowed to dump it up to 20 kilometers from the city. So we go out and we used to dump it all over in all cities of India in the villages. Now those villages are becoming towns. The villagers are waking up to their rights and they are standing up and saying, you cannot declare this village as a landfill site. And then you never build a landfill there. You end up making that into a garbage hill. So, this periphery problems are only going to increase unless you really build a synergy between your rural and urban areas in planning. So many of the questions that you've been talking about are really relevant in a much larger context for India as the structure of the economy changes, more villages become towns, people's aspirations are rising, their incomes are rising, and I think we've lost too much time. We don't even have time for pilots, and that's one area where I have a slightly different perception from yours, because, I used to go around cities all over India trying to see which cities have actually been able to transform some part of their functioning. When we had a National Urban Renewal Mission, Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission, and I found that while the government of India gave the same funding to the different cities, only cities in which the state provided an enabling environment and there was human leadership, only those cities could actually show transformation. The same money given for the same sector in another state, was not able to achieve the result. So I think when we talk of urbanization, we must recognize that the principal players are the state governments, and we have to push the system to make the principal players to be cities. We have to make it more decentralized. But even when we make it more decentralized, state governments will have to play a major role. Government of India can only provide strategic leadership. But it is really, we have to address the problems at the state government level.
I think, let me just add one little thing there, which is also that this dichotomy between rural and urban is not anywhere near as sharp as we think it is, because they're all actually blending into each other. So actually thinking through that problem as well, where we don't make this distinction between one and the other, is also actually very helpful. I think there's one last question there, and then we can wrap up. Yes?
Hi, I'm Roshni. I'm a horticulturist and an environmentalist. There's a very important point I think we need to think about is how are smart cities going to save us from the floods and the sea levels rising, especially Mumbai being surrounded by water all the sides.
Perfect. Okay. So it's sort of climate change-ish, but...
Yeah, and it's a huge topic, and it's why that, in fact, one of the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations is cities. Right, so that's a single one of the 17 SDGs. So it is top of mind at the highest levels of government of NGO in particular around the world. And that's why they're finally sort of getting their act together. And I guess I keep mentioning I'm doing so much work with the UN. It's the first time the UN have actually started to step in to actually work with cities rather than countries. Right, so there is this recognition that the cities, back to the original discussion, are a powerhouse. But they're also where the sustainability hits the road in respect of especially rising sea levels. And it's just something that's just got to keep getting pushed along. And that's why I said earlier, smart needs not to be separated from green. Yeah.
Ashwini, any closing thoughts? Okay. The moderator is always the most unpopular person at panels like these, because I'm the one who has the job of shutting it down. I know there's a lot of questions pending. I apologize in advance for not taking them. We're just constrained by time. Ishar, I'm reminded of a joke. I don't know if you remember this meeting we had in Delhi in February 2010, where it was two cabinet ministers were in attendance. It was an urban conference. There was about 30 people in the room. And the joke was that everybody who's thinking about urban is in the room, The bad news is that everybody who's thinking about urban is in the room. So I'm actually happy to see that number having expanded from 30 to 200. Thank you very much for showing up. Thank you very much to the panelists.
We have a wonderful networking session after this, so please do join us. But thank you very much to our panelists. A really big round of applause to I always feel that we've just scratched the surface. I think we covered a lot of ground, but I can see that there is room for much more dialogue and discussion. But I do hope that what you heard here this afternoon, that for many of the people in the room, there'll be great takeaways, and that you'll think about it and perhaps do something about it. So, or even drop the Asia Society a line to see how we can take this forward. So thank you for joining us, and a big thank you to AECOM for partnering with us on this program.